Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. And we're glad to see all of these lovely faces who have come out to support these delegates today. I would kindly like to ask everyone sitting up along the veranda there to come down and fill these seats to the front, as it's paramount that these delegates are aware of your support today. So before we go any further, can everyone kindly make their way down so we can get things underway? Thank you. Please do so in a safe and orderly fashion to fill as many rows at the front as possible. I would not like to ask twice. Nurses, that group of nurses over there, I could see you all. Hello? Yes, I'm talking to you. Come on, come on, come on down. There we go. Lucy, imagine a year ago today, we was right here, you know.
I know, I was just thinking about that actually. I can remember all the anxiety I was feeling. I remember sitting right exactly where our delegates are sitting today.
Exactly.
And boy, I just couldn't wait to get it over with.
My hands were shaking, my palms were sweaty, I had a lump in my throat, but yet still, we did our best and we hope to see the best from our delegates today.
We really do. We really do. Michael, don't you remember when we were sitting there? I think it was Felicia or somebody was on here presenting, and Michael over there was snoring in the middle of research presentation.
I was not snoring.
As he always was at every single presentation we had to do.
I would admit I was maybe a little tired. I might have rested my eyes, but snoring, come on. As it stands, we know that our delegates have put in countless hours to prepare themselves for today.
They really have. And so that is why I'm very proud that I'm very sure that they will do their best as they come up here.
Most definitely. Seeing all of them here, I want to make sure that we could ensure everyone is present and accounted for. Can I hear from the folks from St. Lucia here today? All right, St. Lucia, present and accounted for.
Nice. What's about our folks from Dominica? Okay, they're there.
Dominica is here for sure. What about our people from Guyana? Where are the Guyanese folks in the crowd?
All right, we're hearing them. What about our folks from Antigua?
Woo.
You heard them, right?
All right. What about our folks from the Vanada Club? Where is he? Hey, Vianney. All right, and last but certainly not least, Trinidad and Tobago, are you in the house?
You know Trinidad is always present.
Of course. So as we get things underway, we would love to get things started off on the right foot as we presentation. So we have a few things on the agenda today, but to start things off right, Alicia, would you kindly open us in a word of prayer?
Yes, I invite you to stand as we pray to begin. All right. Dear most and Heavenly Father, Lord, I want to thank you for your love. I want to thank you for life. I want to thank you for the opportunities that you continue to grant us. Dear Father God, I thank you for bringing us to another research presentation for Portraits of Excellence, once again another year. Dear Lord, as we go through the proceedings, I pray for your guidance. I pray for clarity of thought as each of our delegates present. I pray for the attentiveness of the audience and the persons listening. I pray that at the end of the presentations today would not just be presentations, but that we will leave here inspired and we'll leave here with growth. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. So our theme for this year, more sure I should say their theme, empowering my generation, youth in motion for health and hope. I'm genuinely intrigued to see the means as which they bring across this wonderful theme. So without further ado, I believe that we should get things underway.
We surely should. So at this time, I invite us to put our hands together as we welcome Miss Terencia Joseph as she goes into the next segment of our program.
Good afternoon to our wonderful audience, those of you who are seated right before me, also those who are tuning in remotely. Welcome to our Portraits of Excellence research presentation. I also want to extend a special welcome to our highly regarded judges, who we are so grateful for carving out time in their schedules to do us the honor of adjudicating this year's presentations as they did last year. Dr. Kyra McGowan Santana, Dr. Paul Richards, and Dr. Fiona Rajkumar. This year's theme for Portraits of Excellence, as previously mentioned, is Empowering My Generation. I think they meant your generation. Youth in Motion for Health and Hope. This, of course, is in alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 3, Good Health and Well-Being. So all the presentations this afternoon will reflect this theme in some form or fashion. Our delegates have been working diligently and closely with their mentors on their research projects. Dr. Isha John, Ms. Kimara Reef, Leroy Pierre, Ms. Anastasia Mulrain Campbell, Ms. Lois Baines, Ms. Robin Aline, Mr. Drayson Brown, Ms. Sadia Moore, and Mr. Val Tobias. I know our delegates have seen them as bulwarks through this entire process. So the presentations are a culmination of months of preparation. Our delegates attended workshops intended to refine their research and presentation skills. Some of the workshops included finding your topic of interest and designing a simple instrument, research topic and literature review, research methodology and findings, speech dynamics, sharpening your presentation skills, and these were delivered by very qualified individuals, including Dr. Gersha Pear, Dr. Amanda Thomas, Ms. Nordian Swabi Robinson, and again, our really, really supportive Dr. Paul Richards, respectively. Our students were required to apply and receive IRB approvals. They distributed surveys, collected and interpreted their data, and only at the end of last week did they tie up the loose ends and make their submissions. And I know much of yesterday and probably this morning, they have been putting together and practicing their slide presentations. No doubt there were many tears, expressions of self-doubt, frustrations, very long nights that went into daybreak. In other words, there was a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth. But I'm sure there were lots of prayers, maybe some fasting, and moments of clarity and inspiration over the last few months. This journey or odyssey is an expression of their excellence. Congratulations for making it through. And so the research project is probably the flagship aspect of Portraits of Delegates, the Portraits of Excellence. And this afternoon, our audience, our judges, you are preview to that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to introduce our judges for this afternoon's Portraits of Excellence Research Presentation 2026. Dr. Paul Richards served as an independent senator in the 11th and 12th Republican Parliaments of Trinidad and Tobago. A veteran broadcast professional, he has dedicated decades to the media industry, using his platform to inform, educate, and advocate for societal change. Dr. Richards holds an impressive academic background, including a PhD and MA in educational psychology, an MBA, and a BSc in behavioral sciences. Beyond his professional and academic achievements, Dr. Richards is a passionate advocate for vulnerable communities, championing the rights of persons with special needs and their families, the elderly, and women. His work reflects a deep commitment to social justice, empowerment, and creating a more inclusive society. Dr. Paul Richards. Dr. Fiona Rajkumar is an associate professor of history at the University of the Southern Caribbean. She earned her undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, specializing in history and literature. Dr. Rajkumar's research focuses on ethnic minorities, economic and migration history in the Caribbean, and she is a dedicated advocate for history education. She is the founder of the Yes USC History Mentorship Program and has served in multiple leadership roles. Additionally, she contributes to the National Education Policy as an advisor to the Minister of Education on the Education Advisory Committee. Her scholarly work includes articles and book chapters on Chinese and Syrian Lebanese communities in Trinidad and Tobago, shedding light on the region's diverse historical narratives. Dr. Fiona Rajkumar. Dr. Kyra McGowan Santana is a dedicated educator and academic leader in higher education. She has a strong foundation in the fields of marketing and publishing, both locally and internationally. As an educator, Dr. McGowan Santana is passionate about online education and educational technology with a keen focus on student engagement and differentiated instruction. Her research primarily explores online student engagement, particularly among non-traditional higher education students, while also addressing broader aspects of online learning across various educational levels. Currently, Dr. McGowan Santana serves as the Dean of the School of Business and Technology and Digital Technology at COSTAT, where she continues to drive innovation in digital education and business studies. Dr. McGowan Santana. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for our judges. Now we move swiftly on to the rules for the presentations. The Portraits of Excellence program spans over 7 months. During this period, a series of smaller events are held highlighting the academic prowess, cultural diversity, and leadership potential of our 10 delegates. As part of this journey, our delegates have conducted research projects aligned with our theme, Empowering My Generation, Youth in Motion for Health and Hope. The submission of their written projects contribute to 30% of their overall score, while the oral presentations of their research findings contribute to 10% of their overall scores. Today, our 10 delegates will orally present the findings of their written research projects. As they do so, they, as well as you, and as you support here in the audience, will adhere to the following rules. 1, each delegate is allotted 7 minutes for their presentation. 2, the bell will ring when the presenter reaches 5 minutes as a warning that 2 minutes are left. 3, the bell will ring again when the presenter has reached the 7-minute time limit. 4, points will be deducted for going beyond the allotted time. 5, the audience, your audience, is also requested to please remain silent or quiet during each presentation so as not to distract the presenter or the judges. And 6, the audience is asked to please reserve applause for after each delegate completes their presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for our delegates.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Portraits of Excellence 2026 research presentations. 6 countries, 10 delegates, presenting in the following order. In position number 1, we have Mr. Ethan Leon from St. Lucia. In position number 2, Ms. Akolya Gentle from Guyana. In position number 3, Ms. Angelique Gurley from St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Club Venada. In position number 4, Mr. Nicholas Hanooman representing Trinidad and Tobago. In position number 5, Mr. Adriell Wilson representing Guyana. In position number 6, Ms. Brianne Cuffy from Dominica. In position number 7, Mr. Reyneil Williams from St. Vincent and the Grenadines representing Club Venada. In position number 8, Ms. Abigail Francis representing St. Lucia. In position number 9, Ms. Mya Garraway representing Trinidad and Tobago. Our 10th delegate and final presentation, Mr. Lemario Clarke-Damier from Antigua and Barbuda representing the South Leeward Club. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our 10 Portraits of Excellence delegates in the year 2026. We take this opportunity to remind the audience of the rules as our delegates take the stage. Mr. Ethan Leon is welcomed to the stage.
Good afternoon, learned audience. I am Ethan Leon, standing here to present a snapshot of our collective future. My research investigates the intersection between mental health, quality of life, and academic satisfaction at the Riverside Valley University. In an era of perpetual motion, we are asking a vital question. At what cost do we pursue excellence? The landscape of 2026 is unrecognizable. We have moved from brick and mortar to 24/7 digital existence. But here is the problem. Despite our high academic standards, there is a visible resource drain. We are witnessing institutional creep, where digital demands of our work are invading our personal and spiritual lives. Without intervention, we risk resource bankruptcy. That is a state where our stakeholders, our faculty, they will have absolutely nothing left to give. To understand this, I used the resource drain theory. Now, imagine with me for a second that your psychological energy is a reservoir. Every administrative ping, every deadline is a withdrawal from your reservoir. That is resource drain. I used a convergent, parallel, mixed method design because numbers tell us what is happening, but human narrative tell us why. By triangulating surveys from 133 participants with deep dive interviews with 8 faculty members, we mapped the energy ledger of our institution. My primary research question was simple. Does academic satisfaction actually protect us from distress? Now, in my review of the literature, I discovered a Caribbean blind spot. While most global well-being models are built for high-resource first world Western nations, they don't account for our regional economic volatility or our unique spiritual coping mechanisms. My study fills that gap by providing a localized West Indian perspective on resilience. I utilize globally validated tools, the WHO 5 for mental health and the WHO QOL BREF for quality of life. Our sample was a microcosm of the new wave of education, diverse digital native students, and mid to late career faculty members managing the transition from AI to AI teaching. All data, of course, was analyzed with strict ethical oversight, ensuring anonymity in an era of data vulnerability. Now, the data revealed a striking reality. What we found is a strong statistically significant correlation, 0.658 to be exact, between academic satisfaction and quality of life. In fact, satisfaction and wellness explain nearly 40%, that's 40, of a person's life stability. Interestingly enough, audience, this was not affected by gender or religion. So what does that mean? It means that the stress is systemic. For our students, academic satisfaction is the primary protective buffer keeping them afloat. Meaning, if our grades are good, we are happy. But when we look at our faculty, the story changes completely. While students are in a resource gain phase, the faculty are in a resource deficit. They reported profound financial leaks and a support paradox. Faculty are expected to be emotional scaffolds for our students, while they themselves, they are being neglected. Interesting, 100% of our faculty cited faith and religion as the ultimate replenishment station. In the Caribbean, praise God for this, spiritual integration is not just a mission, but it is a mental health infrastructure. So the implications are clear. Riverside Valley University is maintaining a state of toxic excellence. Can you imagine that? We are achieving high output at an unsustainable human cost. My recommendations are actionable. First, we must view financial empowerment as a mental health intervention. Simply put, pay the faculty more. Secondly, we need to formalize recovery periods. Give them a chance to rest. We also need to formalize replenishment sessions to strengthen the spiritual support. And finally, we need to implement longitudinal resource ledgers to monitor well-being biannually. We need to check in on our faculty. In conclusion, academic satisfaction is a powerful shield, but we cannot pour from an empty cup. For our institution to flourish in 2026, we must shift our metric of success from performance to sustainability. Just remember, quality of life for educators continues to decline. The protective buffer of academic satisfaction will eventually erode. I wish I had time for questions, but that's all my time for the day. Thank you very much. These are some of my references.
That was Mr. Ethan Leon, a second-year computing major who aspires to become a software engineer and performing artist. We now welcome to the stage Ms. Akolya Gentle, a third-year biology major with a biomedical emphasis who aspires to become an obstetrician. Her proposed Guyana Heart and Hinterland Wellness Initiative expands mobile screenings for hypertension, diabetes, and malaria through wellness vans and community health workers, promoting equitable preventative care.
Good day, everyone. My name is Akolya Gentle, and I'll be representing Guyana, the land of many waters. I stand before you proudly representing my country. Just as many rivers, my home country nourishes the land. I believe the flow of information and research must nourish our understanding of the modern world. The title of my research is The Differential Impact of Active and Passive Social Media Use on Anxiety Levels. It is important to note that this is a secondary study. Rather than a primary experiment, this research involves a deep, systematic analysis of existing global data and literature to identify patterns that are often missed. I conclude this study to bridge the gap between digital behaviors and psychological health. Before we dive into the data, I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you closed your social media app feeling truly refreshed and better about your life and yourself? Do we control our digital habits, or have our habits begun to control our heart rates? Just keep those questions in mind as we continue. Let's look at the environment we live in. We call it the digital paradox. We have 4.9 billion people connecting online, yet we are seeing a global epidemic of loneliness. For university students, the stakes are high. Statistics show that nearly 75% of social media use is at its highest. As a biology student, I ask, is it a coincidence that our peak digital engagement happens at the same time as our peak psychological vulnerability? We see students in the global south, including the Caribbean, facing anxiety rates as high as 54%. We are more connected than ever. Yet, the highlights, reels of others make us feel more vulnerable. This secondary research I conducted centered on a viral distinction: active versus passive social media use. Active use being the creation, posting, commenting, interacting on social media, while passive use being more doom scrolling, silently lurking in the background, and even just consuming. You're not interacting with the content. Think about your own routine. Are you a participant in digital conversation, or are you a silent spectator to everyone else's success? My study found that these two behaviors don't just feel different. They affect the brain differently. Passive use triggers upward social comparison, while it's the act of comparing your behind-the-scene footage, your struggles and your messy mornings, to everyone else's polished life that you see online. In conducting this secondary study, I analyzed how self-esteem acts as a middleman. The research indicates that the scroll doesn't cause anxiety. It causes it by chipping away at our own self-esteem. Consider this. If you see 100 photos of people on vacation while you're preparing for an exam, does your brain register that as a motivation or inspiration, or does it register it as failure? That data suggests that for tertiary students, this constant influx of perfect lives creates a feeling of inadequacy. The secondary data shows that self-esteem is the shield. When social media use is passive, that shield breaks and anxiety levels spike. The findings of this study is clear. Passive use is a significant predator of anxiety. However, active use, when done for the purpose of seeking social support, can actually be a buffer. Coming from Guyana and studying in the Caribbean, we must ask, why are the following digital frameworks designed for North when our social structures are so different in the South? My research suggests that we need policy implications tailored to us. I am advocating for universities to implement digital literacy. That just isn't about how to use a computer, but how to protect your peace online. For regional bodies like CARICOM, we should be looking into mental health disclaimers on these platforms. We need to stop measuring screen time and start measuring engagement qualities. In closing, we must transfer the digital paradox into digital well-being. I want to leave you with a final thought. If your phone is a window to the world and it's showing you the reality that you can grow in, or is it a fantasy that makes you feel small? By shifting from passive consumption to active, intentional connection, we can ensure that these tools empowers us rather than entraps us. As a student studying biology, I believe our health, both physical and mental, depends on this shift. Thank you for your time and your reflection.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now welcome to the stage Ms. Angelique Gurley, representing St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Club Venada. A third-year psychology major who aspires to become an international lawyer. She proposed a free chronic medication access program modeled after Trinidad and Tobago's CDAP initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Angelique Gurley.
I'm going to miss out on wearing that honor sash at graduation because there were some semesters that were just too rough for me and I could not focus. And that's no fault of mine because it was due to a health condition that I just could not afford to fix. These are not my words, but a representation of the realities that many students with polycystic ovary syndrome endure. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Angelique Gurley, the Venata representative for Portraits of Excellence 2026. And today, I present my research exploring psychosocial issues among students with polycystic ovary syndrome at a Caribbean university. Polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, is a chronic endocrine disorder affecting up to 13% of reproductive aged women. It involves hormonal imbalance, irregular menstruation, elevated androgen levels, and metabolic disturbances. While most studies focus on reproductive and physical symptoms, the psychological and social impacts, especially for students, are often neglected. Understanding these experiences is critical for supporting well-being and academic success. Women with PCOS experience higher rates of depression and anxiety, and body image dissatisfaction is particularly common. For university students, these challenges are compounded by academic pressures and social expectations. In the Caribbean, there is very limited research, which means student voices often go unheard. Therefore, the guiding question of this research was simple. What is it really like to be a university student living with PCOS? The study aimed to explore the lived experiences of students with PCOS with the goal of answering 3 research questions. How do students with PCOS experience depression, anxiety, and body image concerns? What coping strategies and supports do they use? And what barriers exist within the university environment? I am happy to report that through this study, we have successfully addressed these questions. Existing studies show that women with PCOS are up to 4 times more likely to experience depression and up to 6 times more likely to experience anxiety. What is particularly important is that psychological distress can occur regardless of how severe the physical symptoms occur. However, much of this research overlooks student populations, Caribbean contexts, and institutional environments. Before we move on, by a show of hands, how many of you knew that PCOS could affect mental health and academic performances? Okay, this highlights the awareness gap that exists. To truly understand these experiences, a qualitative phenomenological approach was used to capture the depth of students' lived experiences. Guided by the biopsychosocial model, we examined the biological, psychological, and social factors to holistically understand student experiences. The study included 12 students aged 18 to 30, all diagnosed with PCOS. Participants varied in body mass index, which emerged as an important factor in body image experiences. Semi-structured interviews were conducted, lasting 30 to 45 minutes, and analyzed using thematic analysis by interpretive phenomenological analysis. Reflective journaling ensured rigor and transparency. From these interviews, 5 major themes emerged, which I will walk you through, highlighting the participants' voices and reflections. In the first theme, which is psychological and emotional well-being, participants universally reported psychological distress. Depression, anxiety, and mood swings were commonly linked to hormonal cycles, affecting both academic and social engagement. In the second team, we focus on body image concerns. Nearly all of the participants described struggling with dissatisfaction, particularly related to rapid and difficult to control weight gain, acne, and hirsutism. Importantly, a critical finding emerged. Body image distress was more severe among participants with higher BMI, which further led to negative self-concept and social withdrawal. The third theme explored social support, misconceptions, and stigma. While family and friends were supportive, peer support emerged as uniquely validating. As one participant said, and I quote, "We actually bonded over this because there are certain things that living with PCOS, if you don't have it, you do not understand." This shows that having supportive peers can help reduce stigma and improve overall well-being. However, participants also described facing significant stigma and misconceptions. PCOS was often dismissed as just a bad period, reduced to discipline or weight issue, or automatically linked to infertility. These misunderstandings led many students to limit disclosure and left them feeling dismissed and at times isolated. This pattern of stigma, limited disclosure, led to another important finding. Younger participants reported greater psychological distress linked to body image and academic pressures, while older participants more frequently expressed concerns about fertility and marriage. This finding highlights how the psychosocial experience of PCOS shifts across age groups, influencing both emotional well-being and academic engagement, and sets the stage for theme 4, academic and social impact. Participants described difficulty concentrating, missing classes, and feeling that they were falling behind. Participants also reported avoiding social events, comparison to peers, and feelings of being an outcast. This illustrates how PCOS impacts educational equity and social inclusion. Based on participants' insights, key recommendations include campus-based education, better access to mental health support, peer groups, lecture training for greater sensitivity, and accommodations. In conclusion, PCOS affects far more than physical health. It significantly impacts students' mental health, body image, academic engagement, and social life. Yet institutional awareness and research remain limited. Finally, by recognizing these challenges and offering meaningful support, universities can transform the academic experience for students with PCOS from one of struggle to one where they can fully succeed. Remember, supporting students with PCOS is about equity, well-being, and empowering them to thrive. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now welcome to the stage Mr. Nicholas Hanooman from Trinidad and Tobago, a third-year computing major with a systems software emphasis and a minor in mathematics. An active sportsman and tech enthusiast, he blends energy with innovation. His proposed National Youth Physical Activity Program establishes structured sports hubs during school vacations to combat inactivity.
What if our education system has it backwards? What if the hours spent in the field are just as valuable as the hours spent in the classroom? Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nicholas Josiah Hanooman. My research is entitled Exploring the Relationship Between Sports Participation, Physical Activity, and Emotional Well-Being among secondary and tertiary students in East Trinidad. Regular physical activity is vital for health, yet activity levels among youth are dropping due to rising screen time and academic pressure. In East Trinidad, our youth face these challenges, but we lack localized evidence to understand how these factors relate to their emotional well-being. This gap makes it difficult for educators to design effective interventions. Therefore, this study examined the relationship between sports participation, physical activity levels, and emotional well-being, and also identified differences between secondary and tertiary students in this region. I employed a convergent parallel mixed methods design, collecting quantitative and qualitative data simultaneously. For the quantitative components, 35 students completed a questionnaire, including the WHO Well-Being Index, to measure emotional well-being, alongside questions about their sports participation. For the qualitative components, I conducted semi-structured interviews with 6 students to gather in-depth personal narratives. Data were collected at Caribbean Union College and the University of the Southern Caribbean. Starting with quantitative results, analysis of the WHO-5 indicators revealed generally positive emotional states. On a scale from 0 to 5, mean scores ranged from 2.66 to 3.43. The highest score was for "My daily life has been filled with things that interest me," while the lowest was for "I woke up feeling fresh and rested." A Pearson correlation matrix shows strong positive intercorrelations among all 5 indicators, with coefficients from 0.592 to 0.810. This indicates emotional states are not isolated. A cheerful student is likely to also feel calm, active, and engaged. Furthermore, one sample t-test revealed large effect sizes, showing these positive feelings are substantially experienced by the sample. The numbers only provide one layer of understanding. The interviews brought the statistics to life, and several powerful themes emerged. First, students decisively use physical activity for emotional regulation. It is a way to de-stress and manage negative emotions. One tertiary student said, "Exercise helps me go through my thoughts better," while a tertiary student stated it was the only thing that keeps me going. The second profound finding was physical activity's role in coping with grief. 3 of the 6 interviewees spontaneously shared that they joined a gym to cope with the death of a loved one. This highlights a therapeutic function service alone could not capture. Third, the type of sport influences the emotional benefit. Team sport participants use language of social connection like team spirit, while those in individual activities spoke of internal states like calmness and self-focus. Finally, developmental differences emerged. Secondary students framed experiences around fun and social interaction, while tertiary students viewed activity as a strategic coping mechanism to manage university pressures, such as maintaining their GPA. This shift from socially oriented fun to regulatory calmness reflects a change in life context. When integrating these data sets, the picture becomes clearer. The quantitative data showed frequent participants use richer emotional language, and the qualitative data explained this through a reciprocal relationship. Feeling good from playing motivates continued participation, creating a positive feedback loop. The data also showed general movement, not just competitive sports, contributes to emotional vitality. Integration also revealed a point of divergence. The quantitative data identified waking up feeling refreshed as the most challenging emotional state, yet it was the strongest predictor of having an interesting daily life. However, sleep was not mentioned in interviews. This silence suggests students may not consciously link rest to physical activity, pointing to an area for future research. The main limitation of this study is the sample size, and it does limit the scope of findings and the ability to conduct robust subgroup comparisons. Despite this, the implications are significant. The evidence confirms that sport and physical activity are correlated with emotional well-being. Therefore, institutions must view physical activity not as a co-curricular add-on, but as a core component of students' mental health. Program design should be developmentally specific. Secondary students benefit from fun, team-based activities, while tertiary students need flexible options that fit into their demanding schedules. More importantly, since students support these programs during exam time, they recognize the value. In conclusion, this research demonstrates that sport is far more than exercise. It is a source of joy, a buffer against stress, and for some, a pathway through grief. The statistical data and personal narratives tell the same story. When our students move, they feel better. When they feel better, they are better equipped to learn, connect, and thrive. This evidence provides a foundation for educators and policymakers to foster more balanced lifestyles, revealing how physical activity helps some cope with grief, while also improving overall health and emotional stability. Thank you all for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, in fifth position, we have Mr. Adriell Wilson representing Guyana, a third-year computing major with a systems software emphasis and a minor in mathematics. With interests in media, debate, travel, and aviation, he brings a global lens to public health.
Esteemed judges, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Adriell Wilson. I am the representative from Guyana, and my research project is entitled Social Media and Self-Image, Perspectives from University Co-eds. Before I begin, there are a few key people I would just like to acknowledge, as they played an integral role in my ability to be able to accomplish so much. Firstly, God, Ms. Lois Baines, Dr. Barbara Reynolds, Mrs. Alicia Moore, Mr. Imo Bakari, and Dr. Dave Cassie as well. So this research, well, what prompted it primarily was my own self-observation. Specifically, I would have realized that I spent a lot of time on Instagram. By show of hands, how many of you could say the same? You guys have Instagram and you use it a lot. Right, thank you very much for that. Don't feel worried as yet. Now, as mentioned, I would have observed frequent habitual use. And a second category that I would have observed as well is that I constantly compared myself, or I tended to compare myself while using the app. And this is me comparing myself against images and content that I know are altered, are edited as well. And thirdly, I wondered whether or not my fellow students would have experienced similar behavior, at least noticed similar behavior within themselves. So the research design was a sequential mixed methods approach. The literature review was carried out, was done, and then the data were collected in 3 phases. Both quantitative and qualitative analyses were done on the data. In phase 1, a survey comprising of about 13 questions, including 4 open-ended questions, which was informed by the literature review, was given to respondents. In phase 2, focus group sessions were done and recorded on Zoom, consisting of 3 substantive questions based on the results of the study. In phase 3, 3 in-depth interviews were done using 4 questions which were developed from the focus group discussions. Now, from the survey, a total of about 124 students would have responded. So again, thank you guys very much for responding. And 9 volunteers which participated in the survey would have indicated that they would have wanted to participate in the focus group discussion. Following the focus group discussion, 3 key in-depth interviews were carried out, consisting of 1 Gen Z male who indicated his interest, a Gen Z female, and a purposefully selected authoritarian figure from the campus. Now, the findings were as followed. Students use Instagram multiple times per day. A lot of students would have even indicated, specifically more than half of the percentage who would have done the study indicated that they frequently use the app at least 6 or more times per day. In terms of the duration of Instagram use, about 33% reported spending 1 to 2 hours per day. 20.3% reported spending 2 to 3 hours per day. 8.9% reported spending 3 to 4 hours per day. And 8.9% again reported spending more than 4 hours per day. In terms of that was very interesting to find out. In terms of the impact, and reflective, becoming a habitual practice rather than intentional. And lastly, this suggests that engagement with the platform is not always a conscious choice, but rather an embedded routine within their everyday lives. In regard to question number 2, how do university students perceive their influence, the influence of Instagram on their self-image? Many perceive the overall perception of Instagram as negative. And although they were aware that the images may have been edited or styled, they still tended to compare themselves to the content that they would have actively seen. In regard to question number 3, how do experiences of social comparison on Instagram shape university students' perceptions of themselves? Many Gen Z users place strong emphasis on physical appearance and aesthetic presentation. And lastly, further projections of success are frequently displayed, which could create unrealistic standards of achievement and lifestyles. In terms of the recommendations, the institution, specifically University of the Southern Caribbean, should implement formal policies that can address Instagram's impact on self-image, and this is a point that was raised majorly in both the interviews, the key interviews, as well as the focus group discussion, digital literacy programs, and that would be providing workshops and programs promoting critical social media engagement, student engagement. So this would be, for example, encouraging peer-led discussions on comparison and identity formation. And lastly, personal reflection. And that would be endearing each of you as university students to be aware of how much you use the application and to what extent it can contribute to your mental health. So thank you very much, everyone.
Next to the podium is Ms. Brianne Cuffy of Dominica. A third-year biology major and a minor in chemistry, she aspires to become an optometrist. Her proposed Blue and Green Schools initiative integrates gardens and outdoor learning spaces into schools to support student mental health and reduce stress.
Of Hurricane Maria on youth in Dominica, a study of anxiety, depression, and coping strategies. Natural disasters are often discussed in terms of physical destruction, damaged homes, broken infrastructure, and economic loss. However, the psychological impact, especially on young people, is often overlooked. In 2017, Hurricane Maria devastated Dominica, leaving widespread damage across the island. While rebuilding efforts focus heavily on physical recovery, the long-term emotional and psychological experiences of youth remain insufficiently understood. This study addresses that gap by examining how exposure to Hurricane Maria influenced anxiety, depression, and coping among young people in Dominica. Understanding these experiences is important because without proper insights, mental health interventions and disaster recovery policies may fail to meet the real needs of affected youth. This research is significant because it amplifies the voices of Caribbean youth, a group that is often underrepresented in disaster mental health research. Small island developing states like Dominica face recurring climate threats, yet much existing research focuses on larger countries, according to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2022. By exploring youth experiences directly, this study contributes to culturally relevant understanding and supports disaster recovery approaches that consider both psychological and physical well-being. The study was guided by three main objectives. First, to explore the lived experiences of youth relating to anxiety following Hurricane Maria. Second, to understand how depression influenced their emotional well-being and daily lives after the disaster. And third, to examine the coping strategies youth use and how effective they perceive those strategies to be. This research used a qualitative phenomenological research design, which allowed participants to describe their experiences in their own words. Participants were Dominican youth, ages 18 to 32, who experienced Hurricane Maria. 12 participants were recruited and data were collected through focus group discussions and one-on-one interviews conducted via Zoom. Sessions were audio recorded, transcribed verbatim, and analyzed using thematic analysis. This approach allowed recurring patterns and shared meanings across participants' experiences to be identified. From this analysis, 3 major themes emerged. The first theme highlighted how the hurricane significantly disrupted participants' everyday lives. Many described losing homes, access to electricity and water, and experiencing major interruptions to education and normal routines. These disruptions created feelings of instability and loss of direction. One participant explained, and I quote, "We didn't have a roof over our head. There was no light, no water. From that point in time, my life was at a standstill," end quote. This quote illustrates how the disaster affected not only physical living conditions, but also motivation, structure, and a sense of normalcy during a critical stage of development. The second theme revealed strong emotional and psychological reactions during and after the hurricane. Participants described intense fear, helplessness, and uncertainty during the storm itself. Even years later, many reported ongoing anxiety triggered by strong winds, heavy rain, or even hurricane season. One participant shared, and I quote, "Whenever there is any strong wind gust, it always pauses me in my tracks. My heart begins to race, because you're not really sure if what happened during Maria is going to happen again," end quote. This demonstrates how disaster experiences can lead to lasting emotional responses, showing that recovery extends far beyond physical rebuilding. Some participants also described sadness, loss of motivation, and worry about the future, indicating symptoms consistent with depression and prolonged stress. Despite these challenges, participants also described important coping strategies and support systems that help them recover. Family reassurance, community, faith, friendships, and personal activities such as reading, music, and exercise played major roles in emotional healing. One participant reflected, and I quote, "I learned to trust in God more. I realize I can't control the hurricane, but I can make peace with that and adapt to the situation," end quote. This quote highlights resilience and meaning-making, showing how youth actively worked to regain control and emotional stability after trauma. Many participants emphasized that shared experiences strengthen community bonds and encourage mutual support. Based on these findings, 3 main recommendations emerged. First, mental health services should be integrated into disaster preparedness and recovery planning, including school-based psychological support programs. Second, family and community-centered interventions should be strengthened since social support was identified as a major protective factor. And third, disaster risk reduction strategies should include psychosocial support alongside physical preparedness to promote long-term resilience. To conclude, this study found that Hurricane Maria caused major disruptions to youth's daily lives and contributed to that lasting psychological distress. However, it is also revealed that young people demonstrated resilience by relying on family, community, faith, and personal coping strategies to rebuild stability. By listening to youth voices and prioritizing psychological care, we can help build healthier, more resilient communities, prepared not only to rebuild, but to heal. Thank you.
Coming to the podium now is Mr. Reyneil Williams, a third-year computing major who aspires to become a software engineer. He's passionate about basketball, music, and drawing. His proposed National Men's Mental Health Initiative promotes early intervention, community counseling, mobile clinics, and safe spaces for dialogue, reducing stigma. Mr. Reyneil Williams.
Good evening, everyone. I want to begin with a simple but uncomfortable question. When was the last time you heard a young man openly say, "I am not okay"? Now think about this. How often have we heard phrases like, "Man up, be strong, stop being soft, real men don't cry"? For many young men, especially in Caribbean societies, these phrases are not occasional comments. They are expectations. They become rules for how masculinity should look. But what happens when those rules silence emotions? I am Reyneil Williams, the male delegate for the Venada Club at Portraits of Excellence 2026. And today, I present a study that explores how emotional suppression influences depression among young men at a tertiary institution in Trinidad and Tobago. Globally, depression affects over 200 million people. While women are diagnosed more frequently, men account for most suicide deaths worldwide. In Trinidad and Tobago, men represent a significant proportion of suicide fatalities. So this raises an important question. Are young men less depressed, or are they just simply less likely to express it? Traditional masculine norms emphasize emotional control, toughness, and self-reliance. Vulnerability is often equated with weakness, and as a result, many young men choose silence over support. However, there is a limited qualitative research examining how these cultural expectations specifically affect young men with tertiary institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. That gap is what this study addresses. This research is grounded in gender role conflict theory, which suggests that pressure to conform to rigid masculine expectations increases psychological distress. When men feel that they must always appear strong and in control, they may suppress emotions like sadness or anxiety. But suppression does not eliminate pain. Often, it actually intensifies it. The purpose of this study was focused on 4 main themes. First, to explore how young men define and experience depression. Second, to examine how cultural expectations of masculinity influence emotional expression. Third, to identify barriers to help seeking among male tertiary students. And fourth, to provide recommendations for gender-sensitive mental health interventions. To accomplish this, I use a qualitative research design. Data was collected through a focus group discussion involving male students between the ages of 18 and 25 at a tertiary institution in Trinidad and Tobago. This approach allowed participants to speak openly about experiences that are often hidden. After conducting thematic analysis, 4 major themes would have emerged. The first theme was a lack of trust and psychological safety. Participants would have expressed that men rarely discuss their emotions because they do not feel safe or confident that their vulnerability will remain respected. The second theme was cultural expectations of masculinity. Many participants explained that men are expected to appear strong, independent, and emotionally controlled. These expectations discourage open emotional expression. The third theme was emotional suppression as a coping mechanism. Rather than seeking support, many participants described handling struggles privately and internalizing emotional distress. The fourth theme was the need for structured, safe spaces. Participants emphasized that men may be more willing to talk about emotional challenges if supportive, confidential, and non-judgmental environments exist. In addition to discussions, participants also engaged in a photo voice activity where they represented their experiences through images. Before I show you those images, however, I want us to try a very quick exercise. So for 5 to 7 seconds, just imagine this question. If men's emotional struggles had a picture, what would that look like for you? Now, if you imagine someone wearing a mask, raise your hand. If you imagined someone sitting alone, raise your hand. Interestingly enough, those exact symbols appeared in this study. Participants selected images that reflected 3 major patterns. The first was masking emotions. One image showed a man holding a smiling mask over his face. The participants explained that men often feel pressure to appear okay even when they are struggling internally. The second was internal emotional conflict. Another image showed an icy landscape with lava beneath the surface. Participants interpreted this as representing calmness externally, but intense emotional pressure internally. The third pattern was isolation. An image of a man sitting alone represented loneliness and emotional withdrawal that can occur when feelings remain unexpressed. These images reinforce what participants had already expressed during these discussions, that emotional struggles often remain hidden behind silence and performance. The implications of this research are significant. When depression among young men remains unaddressed, it can contribute to academic decline, isolation, and substance misuse, and increased suicide risk. These findings highlight the urgent need for gender-sensitive mental health initiatives within tertiary institutions. The universities can respond by implementing peer-led mental health group discussions for male students, safe confidential spaces for emotional expression, mentorship programs that model healthy masculinity. If we shift how masculinity is defined, we may change how young men experience mental health. And that brings me to my conclusion. Depression does not always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal. Sometimes it looks like overworking. And sometimes it simply looks like I'm fine. If we truly believe in promoting good health and well-being for all, then we must ask ourselves this question. Are we creating environments where young men feel safe enough to say, I need help? This research is not just about identifying a problem. It is about challenging silence. It is about reshaping cultural narratives. And it is about ensuring that strength no longer means suppression. Because true strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the courage to express it. Thank you.
Miss Abigail Francis is a third-year biology major who aspires to become a clinical biochemist. Blending science with creativity, she brings a holistic approach to service. Her proposed community health strengthening initiative promotes preventative care, improved nutrition, digital health access, and expanded outreach to underserved communities. Miss Abigail Francis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I stand before you not just as Miss St. Lucia, but as a student researcher concerned with a silent crisis sweeping our school and communities. That crisis is the growing fight against non-communicable diseases, or NCDs. Please forgive my AI animation. I really wanted it to be as dramatic as possible. While NCDs rapidly threaten global health, nowhere is this challenge more pronounced than in the Caribbean, where NCDs account for over 76% of deaths. In the Caribbean, young people are experiencing greater rates of NCDs driven by harmful lifestyle habits. And research has shown that these harmful habits are exacerbated during the transition to university due to newfound independence, environmental stresses, which increase the youth risk for NCDs. Current research in universities in Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Nigeria echo this issue, but they don't solve it. Research done in the US showed that school-based interventions and a text messaging program successfully improved healthy eating in children and adolescents. Yet, there is a lack of data regarding our dormitory populations in the Caribbean. Hence, my research topic. My goal was to evaluate if simple text-based messages could improve health among dormitory students at USC. A quasi-experimental design was used whereby participants were screened and eligible participants were invited to complete pre- and post-intervention questionnaires. Objective 1 was to assess the baseline dietary habits and lifestyle practices of dormitory students. Before I go into the baseline habits, let me give you a brief overview of the demographics. There were 130 participants, with 64.5% being female. The participants were primarily in the 18 to 24 age range, and the study considered a number of majors, with nursing, social work, and criminology majors at the highest health risk. Some of the baseline behaviors are as follows. The findings were that students eat fruits and vegetables only 2.4 days a week, while consuming sugary drinks 3.5 days a week. In terms of activity, walking for at least 10 minutes was the most consistent behavior. However, vigorous exercise was lacking. And an interesting find was that sophomores, year 2 students, had the highest health risk scores of 11, which suggests that by the second year, the stress of university life really begins to manifest as poor health habits. The second objective was to successfully implement a 2-week text-based health intervention. This intervention was based on the nudge theory, the idea that small changes in how choices are presented can lead to significant behavioral shifts. To observe the nudge theory, participants were divided into an intervention group who received daily health messages, as you see on the screen, and a control group who received no messages. The final objective was to measure the effectiveness of the intervention by comparing pre- and post-intervention data for both groups. And here is a summary of the key findings. Now let me direct your attention to the box at the top right corner. You will see P equals some number. This is a probability value. It is a mathematical way of proving that these habits were not changed by accident, but that the intervention actually worked. In science, if P is less than 0.05, the result is insignificant, meaning the intervention worked. If P is more than 0.05, the result is not significant, meaning that the change was too small to prove it wasn't just a coincidence. From the table, you see that the intervention group saw a statistically significant reduction in soft drink consumption, dropping by more than 50%. There was also a marked increase in physical activity, with vigorous activity increasing by a full day per week on average, while moderate activity and daily walking also saw significant gains. Concerning fruit intake, there was a positive trend. However, it was not as strong as the drop in soda. This reveals the addition versus subtraction principle, where it seemed that students found it easier to subtract a bad habit like dropping soda as opposed to adding a new habit such as sourcing fresh fruit. Lastly, I want to just illustrate your minds to the engagement rates in this study. While many people drop out of digital health studies, this intervention was able to maintain active participation throughout. Participants were asked to confirm receipt of the messages, and this resulted in a 97% active engagement rate. Students interacted with stickers and emojis, proving that they found this intervention supportive rather than being a burden. However, this study was not without its limitations. The duration of the study for only 14 days might not be the best representation of long-term habit formation. Also, the study relied on self-reported data, which may have introduced bias. And lastly, the sample size might not accurately represent the entire student body. However, I do have some recommendations. Firstly, to you, the students, I recommend that you take charge of your health. Don't wait for a study to remind you to take care of your health. You could put alarms on your phone to drink more water or to engage in other healthy lifestyles. To the school body and institution, I recommend instilling digital wellness check-ins and improving choice architecture on campus. This might mean including more water stations or making fruit more available to students. And regionally, this study proves that text-based interventions work in our cultural context. I recommend to ministers of health across the region to use this as a strategy to combat NCDs among youth. As I close, I leave you with this quote from MLK Jr. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving. If we start now, we can curb NCD risks in this age bracket, reducing the future burden on our healthcare systems. I am Abigail Francis, reminding you that excellence is not just found in our minds, but in the habits that we choose to cultivate every single day. Thank you.
Ms. Mya Garraway is a third-year biology major with a biomedical emphasis who aspires to become a phlebotomist. Her proposal, Healthy Futures TT, introduces mandatory health education supported by a smart app and hotline to promote nutrition, fitness, and mental wellness. Ms. Mya Garraway.
Diabetes, cancer, hypertension. By a show of hands, how many of you are aware that non-communicable diseases are responsible for more than 50% of all deaths in TNT? NCDs are often viewed as diseases found in older adults, but recently it's knocking on the door of youth, affecting people at an earlier stage in life. Good afternoon. I am Mya Garraway, the Portrait of Excellent Delegate for Trinidad and Tobago 2026. And today I will be presenting on my research entitled The Unseen Fight Against Non-Communicable Diseases, a qualitative study among young adults in the Tunapuna-Piako region of Trinidad. Firstly, a non-communicable disease is utilize the health belief model, which explains health behavior through perceived severity, benefits of action, and barriers to change. The literature showed that NCDs are largely driven by modifiable lifestyle factors, such as poor diet, physical inactivity, alcohol use, smoking, and chronic stress. Studies also indicate that receiving a diagnosis can significantly impact a young person's emotional well-being and identity. Social support systems improve self-care and health outcomes. Governments invest heavily in public awareness campaigns and healthcare services to reduce NCDs. This study utilizes a qualitative phenomenological design to explore lived experiences. 15 in-depth interviews conducted in a private setting with participants from the Tunapuna-Piako region of Trinidad between the months of December 2025 to January 2026. Thematic analysis was used to identify patterns in belief, behaviors, and social-related problems to NCDs. Please note that most of the study's findings aligned with previous literature as seen on the screen. Firstly, for research question number 1, participants stated that they were familiar with common NCDs such as diabetes, hypertension, and cancer. In Team 2, many participants linked NCDs to unhealthy eating, lack of exercise, and high stress levels. Similarly, in Team 3, participants mentioned that regular exercise, healthy diets, and routine checkups can help prevent NCDs. For research question number 2, participants explained that managing an NCD requires significant changes to diet, routine, and daily habits. In Team 2, some participants expressed feeling of fear, frustration, or simply feeling different after being diagnosed with an NCD. For research question number 3, participants emphasized that making conscious choices about diet, exercise, and avoiding harmful habits are solely their responsibility. While participants acknowledged the importance of medical screening, some mentioned cost, time, or fear as barriers. For research question number 4, participants noted that busy schedules, peer pressure, or convenience often influence unhealthy habits. For Team 2, many participants stated that family encouragement or family history of illness motivates healthier behavior. And in Team 3, participants reporting gaining health information from social media and official health organization, though some questioned the reliability. For research question number 5, participants acknowledged the use of national NCD initiatives, but recommendations were made for more accessible, affordable, and youth-focused interventions. Overall, these findings indicate that young adults possess a strong knowledge of NCDs and associated risk factors. However, a clear gap exists between understanding and preventative action. In this study, 2 key deviations occurred. Firstly, peer influence, although stressed on by literature, was not a social influence that shaped this health behavior. Secondly, health information was preferred from official health sources rather than social media, which opposed the literature. While government's efforts are acknowledged, participants emphasized the need for more engaging youth-focused strategies. A wider cross-section of youth, as well as a quantitative methodology, are recommended areas for future research to mitigate the limitations of this study. NCDs may be communicable, but the fight against them must be collective. This study highlights that young adults are aware, but awareness alone is not enough. With improved accessibility, stronger support systems, and youth-centered initiative, we can empower my generation in their unseen fight against non-communicable diseases. We are Youth in Motion. I am Mya Garraway. Thank you.
Our 10th delegate for the evening is Mr. Lemario Clarke-Damier from Antigua and Barbuda, representing the South Leeward Club. He is a second-year accounting major who aspires to become an external auditor. He proposed National Youth Nutrition Initiative promotes school gardens, farm-to-school partnerships, produce subsidies, and strengthened nutrition education to reduce NCDs. Mr. Lemario Clarke-Damier.
Good afternoon, judges, delegates, members of the audience. I am Lemario Clarke-Damier, Mr. Antigua and Barbuda, and today I will be presenting my research project entitled Evaluating the Nutritional Adequacy of the Vegetarian and Vegan Meals Offered by the University of the Southern Caribbean's Cafeteria, using a structured menu audit tool. But before we begin, I want to ask a question. On the screen, you will see two meals being displayed. Option A, a vegetarian meal, and option B, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Now, I want to see by a show of hands the persons who would choose option A, the vegetarian meal. Okay, all right. Let me see hands of all of those persons who would choose option B, Kentucky Fried Chicken. All right. Thank you for your responses. Most people automatically assume the vegetarian meal is healthier, but an important question remains. Is a vegetarian meal nutritionally balanced? That question forms the foundation for this research. At the University of the Southern Caribbean, many dorm students depend on the cafeteria for their daily meals. As an Adventist institution, USC promotes a dietary philosophy centered on health, balance, and preventing disease. However, vegetarian or vegan label alone doesn't automatically guarantee nutritional adequacy. Meals must still be properly planned. This is why the cafeteria meals matter. They shape dietary intake, influence health outcomes, and contribute to long-term eating habits. Previous research shows that while vegetarian diets are often associated with healthier outcomes, nutritional adequacy requires intentional planning. Plant-based meals that lack balance may still fall short. Despite this, there has been no prior structured evaluation of vegetarian and vegan cafeteria meals at the University of the Southern Caribbean, and limited research exists within the Caribbean institutions. This study helps to fill that gap. This understanding also aligns with the Adventist dietary principles. As Ellen G. White emphasizes, a balanced plant-based diet requires variety, proper planning, and adequate nutrient intake, not simply the absence of meat. The research question guiding this study was, are vegetarian and vegan meals served by the USC cafeteria nutritionally adequate? This study had three objectives. First, to evaluate how consistently key plant-based food groups were represented by the cafeteria meals. Second, to identify gaps between vegetarian and vegan meal composition. And third, to assess alignment with Adventist dietary principles. The research focused on meals that were offered rather than what the students consumed, because menu availability determines dietary options. A qualitative cross-sectional observational design was used. No human participants were involved, and the USC cafeteria meals were the unit of analysis. Data were collected across breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 75 meals, and it lasted between January 13th to February 18th. Meals were assessed using a structured vegetarian and vegan menu adequacy index based on presence or absence scoring. Each required component received 0 if it was absent and 1 if it was present. The components evaluated included proteins, staples, vegetables, calcium-rich foods, fruits, and healthy fats. Meals were classified as nutritionally adequate when 75% or more of the required meal components were present. Data analysis included descriptive statistics and one sample t-test comparing observed meal scores to the 75% adequacy benchmark. I will now briefly share the key findings. Results showed that the cafeteria meals did not consistently meet nutritional adequacy standards. Vegetarian meals had an adequacy score that was significantly below the 75% benchmark with statistical significance at p less than 0.05. Vegan meals performed even worse, with adequacy scores significantly below the benchmark at less than 0.01. Food group diversity was also limited. The average number of food groups per meal was below the recommended level, and this difference was statistically significant. Staples and vegetables were frequently included. Staples and vegetables were frequently present. However, legumes were inconsistently included. Fruits were often missing, and calcium-rich vegan foods were the most limited component. Overall, meals only partially reflected Adventist dietary principles and did not consistently meet adequacy standards. These findings demonstrate that vegetarian label alone does not guarantee nutritional adequacy. This study is significant for several reasons. First, it provides the first structured evaluation of vegetarian and vegan meals at the University of the Southern Caribbean. Second, it contributes to Caribbean-based research on institutional vegetarian food systems where data are limited. And third, it offers practical guidance for improving menu planning and supporting student health. There were some limitations. This study evaluated menu offerings rather than individual intake and focused only on meals that were readily available, as the cafeteria is primarily advertised to offer vegetarian meals, while staff may sometimes accommodate vegan students upon request. These accommodations were not captured in the analysis. Nutrient level software analysis was not conducted, and portion sizes were not measured due to the use of binary scoring. Future research may include nutrient analysis and student consumption patterns. In conclusion, this research highlights the importance of evaluating institutional food systems using structured tools. While vegetarian meals are widely available at USC, nutritional adequacy is not consistently achieved. Improving menu structure can strengthen student health and better align practice with principle, because healthy food should not just be vegetarian, it should be nutritionally adequate. And now, we go back to the question I asked before. Which option would you choose? The vegetarian meal? All the hands for the persons who would choose the vegetarian meal. Okay, I see there were some changes. And the persons who would choose option B, the KFC. Okay, all right. How many, if your response changed, that was exactly the point of this study. The label is not enough. Balance is what makes it healthy. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Lemario Clarke-Damier and all of our other remaining delegates. At the podium now is Pastor Reyneil Williams, Vice President for Student Services and Enrollment Management.
So, pleasant good afternoon, everyone. And certainly, I had a good time. Good time listening to these young scholars, and good time being challenged by what they researched. I was disturbed twice during these presentations by someone asking me, two different colleagues of mine, one in the north end of the Caribbean, and the other one way down in Argentina. Ex-student of USC asking me, what would we do next with all of this research that these students have done? I want to say to you, my singular answer is, balance is important. So, I want to say thanks again to the delegates, and thanks to our judging panel. It's always a pleasure having you on our campus. And certainly, I am looking forward to what Portraits of Excellence 2026 would bring for us. Congratulations, and I trust that we would continue to support them in their endeavors. congrats and God's blessings to you. I was told that I must pray. Loving Father, thank you for an afternoon well spent. Thanks for the gift of knowledge, as we acknowledge that you are the source of knowledge. I continue to pray that you guide and direct these delegates from now on to Gala Night, and may you continue to help us to utilize the knowledge that they have shared with us for the betterment of not just USC, but the Caribbean and the world as a whole. Be with us in our next endeavors. Protect us and keep us all healthy, we ask. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Amen.